The airport buzzed with the usual chaos: families dragging rolling suitcases, business travelers glued to their phones, kids sprinting ahead of exhausted parents. But among the noise, Colonel James Turner walked with quiet determination. His polished dress shoes clicked against the tile floor, the weight of his uniform heavy, not just from the metals pinned to his chest, but from something far greater: the casket waiting on the tarmac. Draped in the American flag, it carried the remains of Private First Class Daniel Hayes, 21 years old. Gone too soon. Turner had escorted many fallen soldiers home, but this time felt different. Maybe because Hayes had been under his command, or because he had promised the young man's mother that he would personally ensure he got home. No one gets left behind. Those words echoed in his mind as he approached the airline counter, setting his military orders and ID down. The agent, a woman in her mid-30s with tired eyes, barely glanced at him before typing into her computer. Then she frowned, her fingers hesitating over the keyboard. "Sir, I need to check something." Turner raised an eyebrow. Something wasn't right. The agent turned to whisper to a coworker, a flicker of unease crossing her face. The other agent looked over at Turner, then quickly back at the screen. Turner had seen this kind of hesitation before: uncertainty, avoidance, something they weren't sure how to handle. She returned with a stiff smile. "I'm sorry, sir, but there seems to be an issue with your ticket. We can't allow you to board at this time." Turner inhaled slowly, his years of discipline keeping his expression steady. He had dealt with all kinds of obstacles before: political entanglements, high-stakes negotiations, even combat zones. But this was different. "This is a military assignment," he said evenly, tapping the paperwork. "Everything is in order." The agent avoided his eyes. "I understand, sir, but there's a security protocol in place." "Security protocol?" Turner asked, his voice firm but calm. "Yes, sir. It's just policy." The word rolled through his mind like an echo of something hollow and meaningless. Behind him, the line of passengers was growing, restless murmurs filling the space. People shuffled in place, watching the scene unfold. A man in full military dress being denied a flight. It wasn't something you saw every day. Turner squared his shoulders, refusing to be brushed aside. "Ma, I need to understand exactly what the issue is. This isn't a personal trip. This is a military escort, and my documentation is valid." The agent hesitated again, her fingers tightening on the keyboard. Her eyes flickered to her supervisor, a man in his 50s with a name tag that read Frank Delaney. Delaney folded his arms and stepped forward with a forced smile. "Colonel Turner, I apologize for the inconvenience, but we have certain policies in place. Unfortunately, we can't override them at this time." Turner kept his expression unreadable, though something inside him burned. "I've flown with military escorts before," he said, his tone measured. "I know the procedure, and I know there is no policy preventing me from boarding." His gaze held steady. "So let's be honest, what's the real reason I'm being denied?" Delaney cleared his throat and shifted uncomfortably. "It's just an extra security measure. Nothing personal." Nothing personal. Turner had heard that before, in boardrooms, in high-level discussions, in places where people use vague explanations as a shield. He wasn't going to let this slide. Behind him, the whispers were getting louder. A woman in a red blazer leaned toward her husband. A young man holding his boarding pass frowned, glancing between Turner and the airline employees. Then, a voice cut through the growing tension. "Sir, do you have an issue with his military clearance?" Turner turned slightly. A man, mid-60s, stood a few feet away, his USMC hat pulled low over his brow. Delaney looked momentarily thrown off. "No, sir, this isn't about clearance. We just have to follow standard protocol." The Marine let out a sharp breath. "Yeah, I've been through security 1,000 times, and I've never seen protocol stop a soldier from escorting one of our own home." He folded his arms. "So what is it?" The murmurs intensified as more passengers began pulling out their phones. Some recorded, some typed rapidly, spreading the story in real time. The airline staff could feel it too. The original agent looked at Delaney, now visibly uneasy. She whispered something to him before he exhaled sharply and walked off, disappearing behind a frosted glass door. Turner didn't move, his stance unwavering. The whispering in the terminal grew louder. The Marine crossed his arms, watching the scene unfold with quiet intensity. Then, a young woman in her mid-20s stepped forward, phone in hand. Her eyes were uncertain but determined. "I don't mean to intrude," she said carefully, "but I just want to make sure I understand. They're not letting you board. Turner exhaled, glancing back at the counter. That's correct. The woman blinked, as if she had expected a different answer. She hesitated, then turned her phone screen toward him. I'm live right now, she said. People need to see this, and just like that, the floodgates opened. A man holding his phone shook his head. This is wrong, he muttered. This man is literally escorting a fallen soldier. A woman further back in line raised her voice. Excuse me, can someone explain why he's being denied? Passengers were no longer just watching. They were participating. The airline employees behind the counter shifted uncomfortably. The original agent's hands trembled slightly over the keyboard. Then the Marine took a step forward. He was done playing nice. I've seen a lot of things in my time, he said, voice steady but firm. But I never thought I'd see the day when an American soldier, especially one escorting the remains of a brother in arms, was treated like this. The terminal had gone eerily quiet. Even the usual airport announcements over the loudspeakers seemed distant, muted. The only sound was the soft beeps of recording phones capturing every second of what was unfolding. The Marine squared his shoulders. This is a disgrace. The woman in the red blazer clutched her purse tighter. A young man in a hoodie rapidly typed something, shaking his head. Then, somewhere in the back of the line, a voice murmured. It's already trending. Turner didn't move. He didn't need to. The world was watching now. The tension in the terminal thickened as more passengers caught on to what was happening. Phones were held high, recording every second, some streaming live, others posting updates in real time. The airline staff exchanged nervous glances, their previously firm stance now visibly shaken under the weight of public scrutiny. Colonel Turner stood motionless, his posture rigid, but his presence alone carried enough force to make everyone in the room feel the gravity of the moment. A young man in a hoodie tapped furiously on his phone before letting out a low whistle. Damn, this is everywhere now, he muttered, showing his screen to the woman next to him. Twitter was already exploding with outrage. The hashtag let him flay climbing in the trends at an alarming speed. People weren't just watching anymore, they were participating in a national conversation unfolding in real time. Turner, ever composed, watched the scene unfold with quiet awareness. He had been in situations like this before, not at an airport, but in high-stakes environments where those in power made mistakes and tried to cover them up. He could already see the fear in the airline employees' eyes. They knew they had lost control of the narrative. The woman in the red blazer clutched her purse, shaking her head in disgust. Unbelievable, she muttered to her husband. This man is in uniform, escorting a fallen soldier. What the hell is wrong with these people? A murmur of agreement rippled through the growing crowd, their outrage feeding off one another. Then, over the loudspeakers, an announcement crackled to life. Attention passengers, due to unforeseen circumstances, Flight 237 to Phoenix will be delayed. We apologize for any inconvenience. The groans were half-hearted at best. Most people weren't paying attention to their flights anymore. Their focus was here on him, on the uniformed soldier being refused the right to complete his duty. Turner didn't react, but inside he knew exactly what was happening. The airline was stalling, hoping the chaos would die down, hoping they could contain the situation before it spread further. But they were too late. Hey. A woman near the terminal windows gasped, holding her phone up. He's on Twitter, she announced, turning her screen to show the crowd. The tweet, in bold capital letters, read, "They just denied a black U.S. Army colonel his flight while escorting a fallen soldier's remains. This is how we treat our heroes. Let him fly." Underneath, the numbers were skyrocketing. Retweets, comments, likes. It was catching fire. A second tweet appeared, this one from a veterans advocacy group. "We are aware of the disgraceful incident happening at airport name. Our soldiers deserve better. Expect action." The murmurs turned into something else, a movement. People weren't just upset anymore. They were activated. The airline employees visibly tensed, the once confident demeanor reduced to uncertainty. The original agent from the counter, the one who had smiled stiff-lie when she denied his boarding, looked like she wanted to disappear. Turner watched her carefully. She was no longer typing, no longer meeting anyone's eyes. She knew. Then, from the back of the line, another voice rose above the murmurs. "They have to fix this now. No more excuses." A man in a navy blue business suit stepped forward, shaking his head in disbelief. He wasn't military, just another passenger who had seen enough. "This is disgusting. Do they even understand the kind of storm they just started?" Turner remained silent, his expression unreadable, but the wheels were already turning in his mind. This wasn't just about him. It was about Private First Class Daniel Hayes, the young soldier waiting to go home. That mission was not complete, and he would see it through no matter what. The crowd kept pressing, the pressure mounting with each passing second. Then, finally, Delaney, the supervisor, returned. But he wasn't alone. Beside him walked another man, mid-40s, in a sleek navy suit with an airline ID clipped neatly to his pocket. His stride was brisk, controlled, like someone used to putting out fires. The weight of the situation was clear in his eyes as he scanned a scene, taking in the rows of phones still recording. He cleared his throat, stepping forward. "Colonel Turner, I sincerely apologize for the miscommunication," he began, his voice coated in forced professionalism. "There seems to have been an error with our system, but we are working to get you on your flight as soon as possible." Miscommunication. Turner had been in the military long enough to know exactly what that word meant. It meant we got caught. It meant fix this before it costs us too much. He let the moment hang, watching the airline representative shift slightly under the weight of the silence. Then, finally, he spoke. "I see," Turner said, his voice measured. "An error," he said. The man nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. A regrettable mistake. We assure you it was not intentional." A scoff came from the Marine standing nearby. "Right," he muttered under his breath. Turner held the airline rep's gaze for a long moment before speaking again. "I appreciate the urgency," he said, his voice still calm. "But I need to clarify something." The rep straightened, clearly eager to smooth things over. "Of course, Colonel." Turner's expression didn't change. "If no one recorded this, if no one spoke up, would I still be standing here?" A beat of silence. The airline rep swallowed. "Sir, you don't need to answer," Turner cut in. He already knew. The entire terminal knew. Another murmur ran through the crowd. A woman near the back whispered, "He's right." People weren't just angry anymore, they were disappointed. The airline rep adjusted his tie, clearly uncomfortable. "Colonel, let's get you on your flight now." But before Turner could respond, a new voice cut through the room. "Sir." A younger man in an airport security uniform stepped beside the counter, holding out a phone toward the airline rep. His expression was tight, his movements deliberate. "I think you should see this." The rep frowned, taking the phone, scrolling. Then his face paled. The Marine, arms still crossed, raised an eyebrow. "Something wrong?" The rep didn't answer, but Turner could see it in his eyes. The backlash had officially exploded beyond this airport. A major news outlet had picked up the story. The headline was blunt: U.S. Army Colonel denied flight while escorting fallen soldier. Airline scrambles for answers. Below it, a video clip played, footage from the terminal, passengers standing in quiet outrage, the tension clear as day. The rep exhaled sharply, his shoulders sinking. He turned back to Turner, his voice thinner now. "Colonel, we deeply regret this situation. We'd like to issue a public statement clarifying." "The public already knows the truth?" Turner interrupted. Silence. The rep pressed his lips together. Turner looked at the crowd, at the phone still recording, and turned back to the rep. "I don't need first class. I don't need special treatment. I need respect. And so does the soldier I'm escorting." Another murmur rippled through the crowd. The rep gave a stiff nod as if that was all he could do now. "Understood, sir." The Marine let out a small, approving grunt. Turner adjusted his hat. "Now let me finish this mission." But the consequences for the airline, they were just beginning. The silence in the terminal was suffocating, thick with the weight of an irreversible mistake. Phones remained raised, passengers still recording, their collective outrage simmering just beneath the surface. The airline rep's face was tight, his forced professionalism unraveling under the crushing realization of just how badly they had miscalculated. Colonel Turner stood still, unwavering, his posture as sharp and unshakable as ever. Then, everything changed. The automatic doors near the security checkpoint whooshed open, and a new figure entered the scene. Dressed in a crisp military uniform, with an unmistakable air of authority, he strode toward Turner with measured steps. The silver insignia on his uniform glinted under the fluorescent lights, and in his hand, he carried a black leather folder with the unmistakable emblem of the Department of the Army embossed on the cover. The crowd instinctively parted, their murmurs dying down as they recognized the presence of someone who truly mattered. The man stopped just short of Turner, his stance firm but respectful, and extended his hand. "Colonel Turner," he said, voice clipped but steady. "Major Thomas Beckett, Department of the Army. We've been informed of the situation." Turner clasped his hand in a firm shake, his expression unreadable but knowing. He didn't need to ask how Major Beckett had gotten here so quickly. The military doesn't waste time when it comes to its own. Beckett turned to the airline rep, his piercing gaze locking onto the man's sweat-beaded forehead. Colonel Turner and the remains of Private First Class Daniel Hayes will not be flying commercial, Beckett said crisply. The Pentagon has arranged a private military flight. His transport is waiting. The airline rep blinked, his mouth opening and closing as if scrambling for an appropriate response. "Yes, sir, we were just about to," the rep stammered. "You were just about to cover your tracks," Beckett interrupted, his tone polite but carrying the full weight of authority. He glanced at Turner and gave a single nod of respect. "Sir, you're needed elsewhere. Let's get this done properly." A murmur of satisfaction rippled through the watching passengers. Some nodded in approval, others exchanged glances, knowing that what had just happened wasn't just a resolution, it was a message. Turner gave Beckett a curt nod, knowing the mission had to come first. Without another word, he turned his attention back to the Marine. The Marine, the one who had spoken first, who had refused to stand by silently, gave him a firm look. "Appreciate you, brother," Turner said simply, his words carrying the weight of something unspoken but understood. The Marine tipped his head, unwavering. "We look out for our own." Turner let his gaze drift over the crowd, the faces of the people who had refused to stay silent. They had spoken up, not because they knew him, but because they knew right from wrong. That was real unity. He took one last measured breath, adjusted his uniform, squared his shoulders, and walked toward the exit. The airline executive scrambled for damage control, but the story had already spread like wildfire. News networks ran with the footage, the images of a decorated Army colonel being denied his duty looping on every major station. The hashtag "Let Him Fly" had transformed into something far more damning, "Respect Our Soldiers," and it wasn't going away. Veterans groups condemned the airline in public statements, calling for a formal investigation into their treatment of military personnel. Social media exploded with fury, with thousands of people vowing to boycott the airline permanently. The stock market reacted swiftly, with the airline shares dropping nearly 8%, their worst decline in 5 years. Investors panicked, demanding answers, while corporate sponsors distanced themselves from the controversy. Then came the legal ramifications. A coalition of military advocacy groups filed a formal complaint against the airline, citing discrimination and failure to uphold service member protections. The lawsuit threatened millions in damages, but the real cost? Their reputation. Under immense pressure, the airline CEO made a public statement, standing stiffly behind a podium, his face pale and drawn. "This was a regrettable misunderstanding," he announced, his voice lacking any real conviction. "We have placed the employees involved on administrative leave and will be implementing new policies to ensure our service members receive the respect they deserve." But the public wasn't buying it. The footage had turned into a symbol, something far larger than just one incident. As the private military transport touched down in a quiet Midwestern town, Colonel Turner stepped off the plane, standing tall despite the weight on his shoulders. On the tarmac, a grieving family waited. A mother, clutching a folded American flag, her hands trembling. A father standing silent, his face lined with the kind of pain only another soldier would understand. Siblings, grandparents, friends, their eyes red-rimmed but proud, all stood still as Turner walked forward. He had seen these moments before, had been part of them too many times, but it never got easier. He took a slow breath and approached the mother, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "This is Private First Class Daniel Hayes," he said solemnly. "And he's finally home." A silence thicker than any protest, any scandal, any outrage filled the air. The only sound was the fluttering of the flag as a soft breeze swept across the tarmac. This was never about attention, never about making headlines. It was about respect. And this final moment of honor was all that mattered. Turner stepped back as the family closed in around their son, holding one another in grief and pride. He stood there for a moment, then slowly raised his hand in a final, respectful salute. What started in an airport terminal ended in a wake-up call for an entire nation. One moment of indifference was all it took to spark a movement. A lone Marine who refused to stay silent changed the course of what could have been another quiet injustice. A crowd of strangers who chose to take a stand proved that collective voices hold power. A nation that demanded accountability forced those in charge to recognize the weight of their actions. Colonel Turner never asked for special treatment. He only asked for basic human decency. But the fact that it took an entire country watching for him to receive it, that was the real problem. Respect shouldn't be a privilege. It should be the standard. Because when people stand together, injustice has nowhere to hide. If you believe in honoring those who serve, if you believe in accountability, then let your voice be heard. Because silence lets things like this happen again. And next time it might not go viral. The true measure of a society is how it treats those who serve. This story isn't just about a single soldier denied a flight. It's about the deeper battle for respect, dignity, and accountability. Colonel Turner didn't ask for special treatment. He simply stood for what was right, refusing to be ignored. And because of that, an entire nation took notice. How many times do we witness injustice and choose to look the other way? How often do we convince ourselves that our voice won't matter? But this moment proves something powerful. When people stand together, when they refuse to stay silent, change is inevitable. It shouldn't take a viral video or national outrage for someone to be treated with decency. Respect should be the standard, not a privilege. This is about more than just one soldier, it's about all of us. Will we be the ones who turn away, or will we be the ones who speak up? Because silence allows injustice to thrive, but courage stops it in its tracks. The next time you see something wrong, remember this: one voice can start a movement, one moment can demand accountability, and one act of courage can change everything.